everyone, welcome to the second episode of the Young Leaders podcast. I'm Amy, I'm part of the youth governance team, and I'm joined here today with Ben and Rich, who are from Your City Music Festival, and also Tegan, my colleague, who is part of the youth governance team as well. But we're here really today to talk about music in the city and more importantly about creating opportunities for young people in the city. So Ben and Rich, I'm aware that obviously there's a lot of challenges, and I think it's actually really inspiring that you've come in and built something really amazing and started sort of building those opportunities once again. So can you just introduce yourself a little bit and also talk about why have you actually wanted to start this up really?
Yeah, I'm going to let Ben do the why piece because Ben started this on his own and I started helping him in 2019.
Fundamentally, I don't think I've actually ever spoken about this before because I can talk about the reasons why it's important, why we started it. But I reached the age of about 23, I'd messed around, I was too interested in the party lifestyle, let's say, and I was lost as I didn't really know what I was good at anymore, didn't know where I wanted to be, and luckily through one night with one of my friends' rigorous questioning, I realised that I had an ability that I didn't think I could turn into a career, and that was to organise parties, organise events, and I've been doing this since the age of about 15. So then that started my journey and my thinking towards how to create a career out of events. And then as a musician, I was going out and playing festivals like Liverpool Sound City. We played Tramlines Festival in Sheffield. And I looked at it and I'm thinking, this is great for the city. You've got all these people coming and celebrating local music, national music, and all sitting in together. And I come back to Stoke and I was like, what's here? There's nothing here. And then that started getting the cogs turning. I thought, you know what, let's give this a go. Let's start it, because throughout my history in the music industry, which prior to Your City was about 8 years, so much good music that's coming out of the city, and so many great music industry minds that have been born from Stoke-on-Trent, and they need celebrating. So this is where Your City become a concept, and the concept behind the name is Your City is we want to give something back to people of Stoke. So it was like, this is yours, you know what I mean, be proud of it, and that's where the name was born. And then this is when mine and Richie's journeys and paths started to align.
Yeah, so my background as well, I was a musician as well, 20 years ago, showing my age. But I mentioned this earlier before we kind of went live, but I was talking about the facilities, the infrastructure in different cities, like in the northeast. I remember being a musician. I was born in Haslington near Crewe, and Hanley and Stoke was our kind of geographical centre. It was the place that we kind of wanted to play at the Sugar Mill, award-winning venue. And as aspiring musicians, we ended up in Stoke and Manchester, of course, and everywhere else. But what I realised was there wasn't the same sort of infrastructure and support for music industry and for aspiring musicians as there was in other cities. I remember wishing that I'd been born in the other Newcastle, because they had Generator, which at the time was just this music talent development organisation funded by the PRS and the Arts Council, providing kind of workshops and masterclasses for musicians. And I sort of thought, okay, is this something we can do in Stoke? And when I was trying to sort of figure out what was in Stoke, I've lived in Longton for 10 years, went to uni in Yorkshire, in Huddersfield, kind of been all over the place. When I ended up back here, I thought, okay, I'm going to try and figure out who's doing what in the city and whether there's an opportunity to do this kind of thing here. And everyone kept telling me, you need to speak to this guy called Ben. You need to speak to Ben Nixon. And I'd heard of Your City, the festival. It happened a couple of times before I got involved. And eventually I kind of got through to speaking to Ben. And you mentioned earlier that we talked on the phone when you were at work and you nearly didn't answer because you were like, who's this sales call? Is that Ben Nixon? You felt like saying no. But luckily you said yes it is. And we had a conversation on the phone which kind of lasted an hour, probably took all of your lunch break. And when we eventually arranged to meet face to face and talk about that, I wanted to do this music industry stuff, and Ben was already doing this festival and had designs on it feeling like Liverpool Sound City and being a showcase event and an industry event. We just saw eye to eye on a lot of things. It's one of those conversations that you have every now and then with someone that you just see things from the same, like the things that need to happen, the things that you want to do, your inspiration and vision's the same. And so we started working together, and that, we're now 5 years in.
4 years going into the fifth.
Yeah, because we missed one, obviously, because of COVID. For me, the why is about trying to just establish more industry infrastructure in the city and trying to help musicians become more entrepreneurial, I guess, and sort of as much as this, I remember working with an artist, a local artist from Congleton, who got signed to a major label, and I used to talk to him with some of my music business language about fan base acquisition and development, and it made him like almost sick, because he was an artist and he didn't want to hear like business talk about music. But I've always done the management and the marketing side of all the music projects I've been involved in, and eventually started to help other artists. So it doesn't worry me at all that actually it's a business. Yes, it's creative, and you've got to do the music. Is that at the end of the day, that's the most important bit. You're never going to, it doesn't matter how much money you've got or how much infrastructure or investment you've got, if the music's not right, it's not going to go anywhere. For me, the vision was helping musicians in Stoke have the kind of infrastructure that other places have. And between me and you, that's why your city kind of is what it is now. Yeah.
What I think is quite interesting though is how come, obviously we spoke before we went live as well, and one thing we mentioned was that a lot of young people think that to be successful, obviously you have to leave the city and go elsewhere. So I think it's quite interesting that you, like, why the passion to stay in Stoke? Obviously, how come you two haven't fallen into that trap?
For me, was when the journey started. I've always played in the band in Stoke, so that's almost grounded me to the city anyway. But the difference was when I started the festival, I started to then look around the city and look at other industry opportunities, so like industry infrastructure, and I was like, well, there's one record label in Manchester, you've got several. There's no booking agents, there's no PR. There's literally I saw it as a land of opportunity at this point, and I thought, you know what, like this something great can happen here. It just needs a little bit of leadership, a little bit of nurturing, and that's my part on that.
No, I agree. So it was the opportunity. I think the fact that it's not here, it didn't put us off. It actually inspired us to go, well, this is easy. We just need to encourage people to get on with it. Like, just do it. And that's easy to say, and it's not. It's not so easy to do. But actually, I suppose what we're trying to do is just do the stuff that needs to be done, and inspire people to do the same.
I can understand like the risk that people foresee, because it is a big risk, jumping on board, like doing a festival or creating a business that doesn't exist inside of a city, and I can understand that fear. But I think you've got to take the risk sometimes, and I think that's what prevents people from thinking, okay, I'm going to stay and do something inside of Stoke. So it's like, well, Manchester, it's got all this opportunity everywhere, but actually like it's a different level of competition that goes on there, because you've got that much, your competition's a lot harder. Whereas if you come into Stoke and there's nothing there, it's like the only risk that you're taking is really maybe a little bit of financial loss where you start off, but I think there's enough supportive network there from industry professionals around the city to actually make it sustainable.
Yeah, and there are people doing things as well, and I think part of what you've mentioned about the point in this podcast is about the fact that like there are people doing things, and it's about connecting people and making sure that people know what's here. So I was about to say it would be really easy for you to set up tomorrow and be the best music industry booking agent in the city, because there aren't any, but that's not true. There are some. And thinking about it now, it's doing a disservice to some of the people that are doing it, but it's the opportunity. So I nearly went to uni in London to do music tech, and I stuck around because I was in a band, and we went, let's just give it another year. We gave it a few other years and eventually kind of did pack it in, but I'd never really particularly been inspired to go to London. I don't know why. I just haven't. But I do work with a colleague in Manchester, and what Ben and I realised through some of the associations that we've made over the years, we were part of a regional music scenes network, which was set up by a friend of ours now who has been instrumental in us setting up the kind of conference element of the festival. He set up this regional music scenes network where he got a bunch of people from different cities. So it was maybe 12 cities. Middlesbrough, I think, was one. Stoke, Leeds, Manchester, Hastings. Yeah, lots of kind of cities that perhaps aren't, there were one or two. There was Liverpool, there was Manchester, so there was one or two like music cities. But there was other cities that really aren't seen as music cities, but got them together, sat around the table and talked about, well, what are the issues, what are the challenges? And actually, most of the challenges for places like Stoke and Middlesbrough were kind of similar. And then places like Liverpool and Manchester, they have different challenges, the challenges that come with success. I relish the challenge, and I think that's about being here and going, there's opportunity. Yes, it's hard, but that makes it almost more worth doing. Yeah. I've got two kids now, 9 and 11-year-old, and I'm always trying to encourage them to do the hard thing. It's like, do it, because if it's hard, it's because it's worth doing.
So I think we were talking again before we went live about one of the main challenges being the perception of the city and in Stoke, and you mentioned that you never wanted to move away. I was one of the young people that resented Stoke when I was in high school and college. I will move away to the big city, and I did. And I lived in London, and it was great for 4 years. And then I ended up coming back, and as an adult, you look at the city in such a different way as you do when you're a kid, and you think that there is so much going on here. But I think it's easier to see that when you're a little bit older, you've matured a little bit. But if we're going to tackle the challenge of the perception of the city and of the music scene in the city, how do you then kind of get your message across to the young people? Because I might be a little bit ignorant of how the music industry works, but I'm assuming usually you start at a pretty young age and like kind of playing about, messing around. So how are you then encouraging the younger and the newer artists to stick around through all of this?
I'm going to use Lissy Taylor as the example that we spoke about earlier with, who works at Newcastle College. She's a lecturer there now. So she actually went away to the University in Manchester, the British and Irish Modern Music Institute.
Well
Remember the acronym, right? What Lissy did, she left the city, went to one of the most prestigious universities you can for music management, and then come back inside of the city. And what she's created roughly, I might be getting the numbers wrong, but I know it's definitely roughly about 15 artists. But these artists are going into the city with a mind, okay, we need to be thinking professionally about social medias, we need to be thinking as what we do as a business. And for me, that's massively important. If you're going to go away from the city, fair enough, and learn these different skills, but coming back to the city and then putting them skills into the younger generations that are going to be coming through, I think it's going to create a sustainable industry. For me, I think that's the way in which it's going. I'm not sure if I answered your question then.
I think it's like changing perceptions of the young people as well, like coming up through, and I suppose they're doing that through teaching as
Right
well.
ways, yeah.
But yeah, I suppose it's again the maybe slightly older, like
I think
uni.
You're right as
style.
well about the fact that, because I remember, like I said earlier, being a sort of 16-year-old musician, we aspired to kind of play at the Sugar Mill, and eventually once we were playing there, we never really saw sort of handling Stoke as like the end goal. It was like the first step on the ladder, and from there it was like, we want to play Stoke because then we might be able to get a gig in Manchester or London. And I think, like you say, the older you get, the more you kind of the frame of reference for everything changes. It's a really tough question, like how do we change the perception? I mean, there's a lot of people trying to do that for the city in general. Some of it is huge, and we can't sort of take on everything, but if we can help musicians sort of reconsider a choice of I need to go to Manchester and leave Stoke behind, then that's something we need to do. One of the things we're trying to do this year is work with Ruth Steele, part of the City Music Service, and give young bands, and we're talking kind of, I guess, school age, sort of 15-year-old bands, the first slot on all the stages of the festival. So try and kind of give them a platform, come and play at a music festival, and that's like a notch on their music career, I suppose. And then what we want to do more than that is kind of mentor and coach artists. So as much as Your City Festival is it happens once a year on the late May bank holiday, that's always when we've done it, apart from after COVID, we did one in July to fit in with being allowed. Yeah, we understand the need for artists to kind of have mentorship and coaching.
I think I've got something on that. I think the perception thing, handling that, isn't necessarily at the start of the process. So as a young musician or whatever you want to be in the industry going forward, like, it's a great place because it's quite exciting. You can always draw loads of people in from your colleges, universities. I think part of the process happens with the lack of infrastructure within the city. So I know, for example, and I see this all the time, where band comes through, they can sell out the Sugar Mill within the first few gigs, and it's great, you've got a buzz about him, and then the next month they play in Stoke, audience drops, and then the next month they play in Stoke, and then the month after, and by the time the year's over, they've completely exhausted their own fan base. But that's because of the lack of infrastructure, and maybe it's lack of education, maybe education isn't the right word, but it's the lack of information going into bands of how to get outside of the city. And I think that's what stunts the music industry in Stoke. It's later down the line, after a year or two, or 4 years, where they lose audience and they lose passion, and then you see loads of bands, musicians drop out, and they lose that vision, they lose that dream. And I think that the infrastructure needs to be on different levels. I mean, what Leslie's doing is at the start of the process, where she's encouraging them to go into the music industry, to think of the music as a business. But I think there also needs to be a level of infrastructure, and maybe it's with venues, maybe it's with just like, you know, is it Generator who take artists and like talent development at different levels, so it's like you can take your business elsewhere, we'll show you how to.
We need to encourage local, potentially local musicians, but also music enthusiasts to kind of actually have a go at setting some of these things up that we need. Like, we need more kind of booking agents, we need more promoters, we need more venues, really. Like, we talked about this earlier, but there's always a gap in venues in Stoke, where if you get to the point where you can sell at the Sugar Mill, there's nowhere bigger to go before you get to Victoria Hall, and that's 1,500 capacity. So yeah, there isn't really, and even on a smaller scale, you've got Captain's Bar, who are like 40 capacity, and then from there you jump up to 200. Yeah. So, you know, in Manchester there's 20 capacity, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 100, 150, 120. So you can build as an artist, and but that's, again, it's not an easy, there's no magic wand to kind of just create new venues. That obviously costs a lot of money. The other stuff you're talking about, infrastructure, I feel like we want to encourage more support for artists in terms of the other bits of industry that don't exist here. So, you know, you can't sign, there's no publishing company here for musicians. There's I don't think there's any labels, or at least none that I know of, who are kind of at the same level that some labels in other cities are. And, you know, those kind of things, they're not easy to do, but I think if we had those kind of outlets, and there's been one or two people tried to do things in the past, but it's just a case of don't give up on those things, keep doing them. If anyone's got any spark of an idea to want to sort of set up a label, for example, then just do it. And if we can help them, this is what I mean about Your City Festival not just being a one-time thing. We're trying to get to the point where it's a year-round provision. The other thing for us is about understanding what musicians here want. And I think the ideas that we've talked about with kind of encouraging young people, I really want to understand sort of what people want to do, and then try and figure out how to help them do it.
It's important to talk about the audience element of it as well, though, because I'm no musician, but obviously I love going to a concert, and actually I'm unaware of a lot of things that are going on in the city. And just this morning we were laughing because we were trying to stalk you guys on social media to see what you're about. Obviously we could see a little bit about what's going on with the festival, but only like little dribs and drabs. And obviously, like, we know that through being here at the YMCA, and obviously we know a lot of opportunities simply because we work here, so we get fed that a lot more. But people in the city don't actually know what's going on, and if it wasn't for the YMCA, I might not have even known about the festival. And I think that just shows that it's more important to do things like this and to get the idea out, because yes, obviously it's very important for musicians to feel like they've got a platform to do these things, but also it is important for people, like the perception of people in Stoke and the perception of being in Stoke isn't just musicians, it's everyone, isn't it? So people venture out to go elsewhere just to see a concert, and obviously how do you think we can keep people here to also actually, capture that talent rather than going elsewhere to see that?
It's like you said, by driving awareness. So one of my pet hates with what the council's put in place is you can no longer put posters around the city. It's classed as fly posting, and you can get a fine for that. And it's like, well, where else you can put a poster in, like Bottlecraft or any of these other businesses? But even if you think about footfall, you might get a few numbers, but you're not talking loads. Where it's like you can put, if you go in Manchester or Liverpool or pretty much any other city other than Stoke, you've got certain areas where you'll see just gig posters everywhere, and people might stay and pay attention to it. But I think we push out all the branding to as many people as we can through Facebook ads and the band's promotion. To get something engraved in someone's head, they need to see it regularly, and there's nowhere inside of Stoke where you can physically have something without the risk of getting fined. Like you said, doing things like podcasts like this, recently developed networks with the NHS as well, who are going to be pushing out to the group of whoever's under the NHS email system. We've got a Newcastle College where we're pushing out to all of their college. We've got the university as well, which, like I said, it can be difficult, but it is about doing things like this.
Yeah, but that's the other piece of the puzzle, isn't it? The audience development bit. And one thing that we always sort of struggle with, I guess, a lot of people doing the kind of thing that we're trying to do with, is the buying behaviour around here for tickets. It's so last minute. It really makes running a business difficult, because we're taking a lot of risk, Ben especially, because it's if we haven't got funding, it's your pockets that are kind of becoming deeper and deeper to get it happening. And we're kind of going, well, we know we need to sell X amount of tickets and we break even, but that's really difficult. So yeah, I think it's a good question, like how do we develop audiences around what we're doing? And I think we just try a lot of stuff, I think is the simple answer. We just try and do everything. But some of that comes down to funding. So for example, last year we had some Arts Council funding, so we were able to do a lot more marketing wise. You know, we had a couple of billboards around the city, and those kind of things, as much as like no one's going to stop and buy a ticket by seeing a billboard, but it gives that perception that there's something big happening and that the festival's growing. We haven't got that funding this year, so we haven't got the billboard, so we're kind of hoping that sort of perception is still there from last year. But in terms of kind of audience development, it's something we're always working on and trying to understand how best to do it. It's about building communities, I think, around what we're doing.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, so when I met up with one of the top chiefs of Liverpool Sound City, and they said that 80% of their ticket sales are actually from people within Liverpool, which I thought was surprising because they have all these big artists coming on. With Stoke, we had a look at, so the approximate population is 250k. We need to sell out the festival 0.005% of that to be able to sell out the festival. So I think, oh, surely we can do that in the city. But again, it is going back to how do we advertise to people in Stoke? How do we... More people knew about Robbie Williams playing at Port Vale last year than he did Your City, and like that was a one-off event. It was promoted for ages. Your City's been standing here for a few years now, and it's like, how do we... I know he's got obviously a bigger marketing network, but how do we achieve it on that level? You know what I mean? If we could tap into every single one person in the city, we'd be laughing, wouldn't we?
I think it's really hard. Like, even we've struggled. I mean, I've ran a youth project here for 3 years, and it's been running since before I took it, and it's always the one thing that we've really struggled with is pushing marketing out. We have to rely on a lot of word of mouth, and we partner with all of the schools, we partner kind of with community groups and centres, and it's still struggle to push out people, and kind of the amount of people that I come and say, oh, my life, I didn't even realise you existed. And I'm like, how do you not? We've been here for so long. But it is really hard, and it really shocked me what you said about the council, because I also think the flyers, that's such a, for me, I associate that with like the music scene. It's got this almost aesthetic to it that you're like, oh yeah, that's going on. And especially for young people coming around, I would much rather see a whole wall of band posters and music posters than painted over graffiti for so many walls. It brings, I think, a level of life to the city, and surely I think that our local council and local businesses should be supporting that, because surely putting a music festival on in the city, if you're bringing people in, you're bringing that to also the businesses, the sector around it as well.
No, you're right. The footfall sort of piece is the one thing we have over potential kind of people to help us in terms of funding, like, because that's what we can do. We know that we can bring, like, ideally a couple of thousand people in for the days into the city centre. So yeah, that's one kind of stick that we can use. But other than that, like, the one benefit we have as a kind of multi-artist festival is that we've got 50 or 60 local artists. So we really kind of lean on the support of them. And on the one hand, in the past we've found that when you're running a festival, artists promote the festival less than their own gigs. They're going to, because like their own gigs, they need to sell tickets. It's for that. It's obviously like they want to sell as many tickets as they can. But when they come to a festival, there's this assumption that the festival has done the marketing and it's all done and dusted. And obviously we do everything we can, but we still rely on them. That's the artist community piece that we want to sort of pull together, and we're trying to build the conference elements around what they want and trying to bring them together and help galvanise that sort of music scene and let artists know that there is a scene and there is a community. But yeah, outside of that, it's like we've just got to do as much as we can to reach people, as many people as possible. Like, at the end of the day, we might reach someone's mum and dad reading the Sentinel, who might then tell their 15-year-old son who's in a band, like that. You know, so we just need to reach everyone so that people can tell anyone who might be bothered.
Reaching every platform. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully. More of a wider question like that I'm thinking about, really, because obviously this industry has its struggles, but do you think in Stoke-on-Trent in general, Tegan, you said with your youth project that you feel the exact same, like it's been going on for so long, and I've seen the successes of that project as well, and what amazing things you can do, and the people that come on that project, and obviously the people that come to the festival, have an amazing time, but then it's just passing that along. And I think, is it in Stoke-on-Trent, do you think there's this wider issue, I suppose, that we need to tackle sort of on the top before we start tackling singular industries, in terms of sort of like advertising, in terms of creating opportunities? And actually there is a lot of opportunities. You said yourself you're at a university course. I didn't even know that existed, and it sounds amazing, like just down the road. And actually, I think it's not just necessarily these singular industries, but also the wider issue that Stoke-on-Trent doesn't have opportunities when actually it has, and people don't know about it.
I think you hit the nail on the head, really. I think it is a wider issue of the opportunity, the opportunity to advertise what you're doing. And it's like even things were like, we were talking earlier about slang, which is called bottle craft. It's like, people don't know about that inside the scene. It's why not that. It's like, people love it and people talk about it all the time, but it's like you still find loads of people about what's bottle craft, what's the cultural quarter.
There was something really interesting a few years ago. I don't know if you came across it, called Lucky Bag, and it was a brown paper bag. A couple of local artists. I can't remember what their disciplines were, but what they'd done was amazing. They had this little brown bag, and it was a load of flyers of local kind of creatives and artists and what have you, and they got it distributed around all the independent shops. That kind of, there's something missing, I think, isn't there? That's like, okay, there's no sort of media thing that exists that just showcases everything that's going on in the city, or if there is, it's not working. So
I think the answer is in community. I think there's a lack of community. So in the music industry in Stoke, it's only just starting to get back together again, where you've got all these little pockets and they starting to work together and help each other out. But I think on the wider scale, I think it's like, so with whatever project you're running, whether it's to do with music, the arts, like youth services or anything like that, so maybe the answer is sitting around the table one time, like, how can we help to cross-market each other?
Yeah.
Well, it's that way, then you tap into each other's networks. I think, community is most likely the answer to that.
Because I think Stoke is essentially built with communities, and I think that's one of the best things about Stoke, but also something that holds it back as well. We're a city, but of 6 towns, or however many towns have been added on top now on the outskirts. But each town has their singular community, and I see it with the young people that I work with. They stick to their postcodes because either that's safe or that's where their generations and generations of families have been. And yes, everything that's going on with the community, but they're all almost closed off to one another. So it's trying to bring everyone together, that we have these great pieces of culture, heritage, activities, whatever going on all around the city, not just in Hanley. But did you say you're from the south of the city? Yeah, so we've got so much going on in the communities, which are so tight-knit, and they're also some of the most generous, the most kind. Like, we were the kindest city a few years ago in the whole of the UK, but we still give ourselves and hold on to this almost negative representation of ourselves as a city, when there's actually so much to be proud of and to shout about. I think it is just bringing everyone together, sitting them all down at a massive table and be like, come on.
100%. And I think what you said there about the 6 towns things, I personally think this is detrimental way of thinking at the minute, where people are still very, like you said, the different areas, or we're Launton, we're Tunstall, it's like, and people have got a problem with the actual expansion of a city centre, and it's like, but historically, this is how places develop. It has to have a centre and grow outwards, and what Stoke's always been is these little pockets, and how are they supposed to grow, because it's the funding split. Going back to the perception of the city, if people can start viewing Stoke-on-Trent as one city instead of this old way of thinking of like 6 towns, I think that could benefit everyone from in terms of audience, and whether you're working in any industry or not. I think that's a challenge that needs to be tackled, really. For me personally, anyway. I know people disagree with me strongly with that. But.
Well, I made the mistake of mentioning the fact that, like, maybe we should be doing things in the individual towns. This was on a WhatsApp chat, wasn't it, between two, and like, your reaction to that was exactly like you just said. Yeah, no, we need to get away from that way of thinking. We need to pull it together as a city. And it's a strong enough argument for me to shut up about it.
I read a really interesting book called Humankind: A Hopeful History, and it was basically saying about how humans as a species, like, we're very social species, but the problem there is as well, we shut off people that we aren't familiar to. So that's just the exact same thing about the towns, like, and it's proven to be true as well. So we'll be really friendly and really familiar with people that we essentially know, but as soon as there's someone we don't know, we don't share that same familiarity and that sense of kindness. We can be quite, I suppose, not very nice, can't we? Like, we can be like, that's my town, my space. When it shouldn't be like that. We should be inviting everyone to come in together and celebrate right here what we can do.
Yeah, 100%. And I think just one city instead of like loads of different towns. But
one city and many opportunities.
Which opportunities is something that, like, I think we haven't really touched on much in terms of what, like, your city. I suppose we've talked about the fact that we want to try and encourage local musicians. We want to kind of create something that benefits the sort of music going public.
And opportunities for artists here. That's the thing that we need to pinpoint, isn't it, really? So I think we are coming to the end of the podcast now. So if you can tune in, we will be on Spotify. And also, if you want to look more about the opportunities that we do have, obviously you can look at the YMCA website. We have several different services going on there. And please go to the Your City Music website and get your tickets, because it's an excellent event. And if you can just tell us whereabouts we can find those tickets.
So you can find the tickets on yourcityfestival.com website. And the festival takes place on the 27th and 28th of May, taking over 4 venues, approximately 65 live performances, and each one of them is immense, so you'd be missing out if you don't turn up.
Well, I personally can't wait.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming.
Yeah.